So this is a compilation of 2 different videos that I did on satanic ritual abuse that you're going to want to watch all the way through. And it covers satanic ritual abuse in church and government. And I was able to interview right before his death, just a couple of weeks before he died, Bishop Glenn Pace, one of the presiding bishopric of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And what he did was he actually is one of the few people that did an investigation within the church on satanic ritual abuse. And I was able to talk to him right before his death. I discussed that right in this video and much more right here on Tree of Liberty Society. Make sure and share this video.
I hate the term, but major trigger warning on today's Tree of Liberty program. I am Ben McClintock, and I've covered this before, but it's actually in the news again about satanic ritual abuse and sexual ritual abuse. And it's actually hitting the news where accusations are going back and forth between the Utah County District Attorney as well as the Utah County Sheriff. So just sparks are flying on the satanic ritual abuse case front on today's Tree of Liberty program. I don't mean to laugh, but it's just you don't know what to do sometimes before. It's serious, it's sick. And but that's what we're going to be talking about. Make sure you click on that subscribe button, click on that bell. Right now we're in the middle of our 7-day ban on YouTube, so we'll be putting this up on new alternative platforms in addition to on Facebook, and then it'll be back up on YouTube when that YouTube jail time gets done with. So make sure that you also don't miss a program by subscribing to our email list and our text list, so that way you get alerts whenever something comes out. You'll know about a new video wherever it's at, no matter what platform it goes out on. You'll know about it because you signed up for those alerts. So with that, let's get into this very serious subject. Let me give you some background. I think it'd be really helpful, because there have been some things that folks, when there was a big up to do about this in the news, all over the news in our early 90s. And so there was, there's just so much in my head going on about this. Sorry. In the 90s, there was what was from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There was a memo that was leaked by a Bishop Glenn Pace, which we'll get into in a second. But also you have other books that I would, they're very serious subject, but I would recommend understanding what's really going on with our elected officials and elites in all aspects of our society and what they're involved in. And one of those books is called Transformation America, and the other one is called The Franklin Coverup. And those books document very, very clearly that this stuff is going on. It's very real. When we think about this conspiracy that I talk about, this isn't just, oh, these guys are just socialists and, we just need to kind of fix them. No, these guys are evil. These guys are satanic. And it's not, when you talk about satanic, you're not talking about, goth kids, right? This is very, very real. And this weekend we'll be covering the satanic unbaptism that they'll be doing at the Sodomite Pride Festival in Salt Lake City as well. So this Satanism is very real amongst the elite, very real amongst our elected officials. Okay, very, very real. And if you want to know the documentation on that, names you will recognize, read those books. Okay, so let's give you some background first with the memo that was released from Bishop Glenn Pace. And this is the Strengthening the Church Members Committee. This is a committee that Pace was on. And they cover a lot of different things on strengthening church members. Some people like what they do, some people don't. But what happened was this memo was, it never came out if it was, where it came from, but it was leaked to the Tanners and the Lighthouse Ministries. So just as more background as well. So I have verified the authenticity of this with Glenn Pace personally, 2 weeks before he died, I knocked on his door and wanted to talk to him about the memo and verify its veracity and what he thought about it in the years since. And a couple of things, he was very didn't he was very shaken and unnerved that I found where he lived and that I knew about it. But he said that the memo was very real. It was true that he didn't include everything, that it's worse than what he wrote. He said that if members of the church knew more about it and knew about the reality of what was going on, they would be very, very shaken about who was involved in it as well. That's what he told me personally. And then a couple of weeks later, he died. I hope I didn't contribute to that. He seemed pretty healthy, but a couple of weeks later, the news reported that he had died of the flu. So very, very interesting. So let's get back to the memo itself and what it covers. So this is a 12-page memo. I'm not going to go over the entire thing, just going to go over some key points, and we will have a copy of it in the article version of this video. So I encourage you to check that out. So pursuant to the committee's request, I'm writing this memorandum to pass along what I've learned about ritualistic child abuse. So what was going on was that the church was getting all kinds of reports from all over the West. And so it was just, what was crazy, it was just going on. And so they had to, they put Pace in charge of digging into it. Was there anything to it? So you received a social service report on Satanism dated May 24th, a report from Brent Ward. So they have all these different reports that I don't think have become public. I haven't read those myself. So if you are aware of them, I'd love some information on those reports as well. So he limited it to 12 pages because they already had all this data on the other stuff as well. So he met with 36 victims. The number could be twice or 3 times as many if I did not discipline myself to only 1 meeting per week. I've not wanted my involvement with this issue to become a handicap in fulfilling my assigned responsibilities. I also felt someone needed to pay the price to obtain an intellectual and spiritual conviction as to the seriousness of this problem within the church. Of the 60 victims I have met with, 53 are female, 7 are male, 8 are children. The abuse occurred in the following places: Utah, Idaho, California, Mexico, and other places. 53 victims are currently living in the state of Utah. All 60 victims are members of the church. Witnesses in participating in human sacrifice. The majority were abused by relatives, often their parents. All have developed psychological problems, and most have been diagnosed as having multiple personality disorder or some other form of dissociative disorder. Ritualistic child abuse is the most hideous of all child abuse. The basic objective is premeditated to systematically and methodically torture and terrorize children until they are forced to disassociate. So the abuse causes them to go crazy and to disassociate. So that creates the multiple personality disorders. And so it does a few things. It helps protect, because if they can prevent the person from remembering what's going on, then these people are protected in their crimes. Also, the fact that these people are crazy protects them, because now you can just dismiss these people as being crazy. And so that protects them, because as a part of myself investigating this and looking into it and finding it, trying to figure out things along what's really going on, every single person that I've interviewed that have claimed to be victims of this, personally interviewed, have all been really, serious mental problems, and it seriously affects their credibility. There are certain things that they say that you can be like, it's not true. And there's other things you say, wow, that's, certainly plausible, especially since, as Glenn Pace points out, that these people that never know each other, don't know each other, don't live close to one another, they will repeat the same things. The same individuals will be involved. And so you have a lot of that type of stuff that adds credibility to it as well. And so But because of the crazy, you don't know. It's hard to really grasp which parts are real and which parts are fantasy because of the implanted and abused memories. Okay. So as a part of this, it's not, it's, they are also engaged in um, part of this ritual abuse. Um, they, it is known that they are, well, as a part of the accusations, I should say, it is involved in um, cannibalism. And this is a part of when I talk about, I mentioned the other books, with in addition to the Glenn Pace memo, which talks about this as well. Transformation America and the Franklin Coverup both mention that as well. And it's actually become almost so mainstream that the FDA had to come out with a warning against receiving young donor blood. So as a part of this, they, to reach the mainstream, they weren't engaged in the cannibalism itself, but they were somehow obtaining blood from the young and injecting it into their bodies. And it became so mainstream that even the government had to come out and give some warnings about that. So, probably, the people involved in that part of the FDA either weren't engaged in this or they don't like competition. They don't want people that aren't in their circles to be involved in this. And so they put out those types of warnings, because I have no doubt that there are people at the high levels of the FDA that are engaged in this stuff additionally. And so now that brings us to June 1st, 2022, Utah County, Utah. And we have two elected officials up for re-election. You have the county sheriff, Mike Smith, and you have the county attorney, David Levett, in a battle back and forth with insinuations and accusations. And I wanted to talk about that. It's, it's relevant and what's going on in the news and relevant to what's happened in the past. And so you have this, I thought was interesting was yesterday, every single news agency had it as their front page, on their front page, except for KSL and Deseret News. Make of that what you will. They're all connected together somehow. So I would have expected them all to be unified on this. But for whatever reason, those two agencies did not have it as a front page news story, but all the other ones did. So Utah County Attorney David Levett is calling for an investigation of Sheriff Mike Smith handling of allegations involving ritualistic sex abuse. Levett called for a press conference Wednesday morning. The sheriff's office told the media the night prior that it is investigating a child sex abuse ring that operated in Juab County and Utah, Juab, and Sanpete counties between 1990 and 2010. So it's pretty interesting that because in the report, in the alert from the Utah County Sheriff's Department, didn't mention him at all. But he felt that he wanted to call a press conference the next morning to address it. At the press conference, Levett announced that he and his wife were subjects of a child sex abuse investigation 10 years ago. So right around that time frame, would claim those allegations were totally untrue. I mean, I wouldn't imagine he'd admit it. I learned that my wife and I were part of those allegations, allegedly that we were guilty of cannibalizing young children and murdering young children. Okay, that was the allegation against him. He admits that that was the allegation against him. And so Levett, of course, calls the victim or alleged victim a mentally ill person, which, whether it's true or not that the abuse happened, if the abuse happened, yes, they are mentally ill. But doesn't mean it didn't happen. Dismissed that he and his wife ever participated in ritual sex abuse or ritual child sex abuse. To have my wife's reputation, her professional career, and everything about her life's work called into question, brought into question by a few cheap political opportunists, offends me to the depth of my being. It does nothing but to demean the integrity of me, my wife, my 15 other members, and 15 other members of this community who had absolutely nothing to do with a discredited case from 15 years ago. And then in the following, later that day at 3:00, June 1st, Sheriff Mike Smith comes out and addresses that it was discredited. And Mike Smith claims that no, it wasn't discredited. That it was just dismissed without prejudice. And so at the time, David Levett was the county attorney for Juab County. So he was the county attorney for Juab County, and now he's the county attorney for Utah County. Okay. But at the time, Juab County. And at the time he was one of the ones that were being accused of this, and that the charges were then dismissed without prejudice. So ask the question, was this a case of you scratch my back, because we understand that the conspiracy, of course, protects itself. Were these charges dismissed not because there was no evidence, but because Levett was a powerful person? Now, Mike Smith, I've gotten many reports of him being involved in thuggery. He's been involved in stealing people's property. Did a report on the Cromars and their activities in being stooges for the federal government with that process. And so there's no love and support for me personally for either one of these. This is basically, to me, I see it as the insiders fighting against each other for whatever reason. So in this case, I don't know. I don't have any physical evidence on either one of them, but the things that they've both been involved with, I would personally not be surprised. Is my personal opinion, is that I would not be surprised if these accusations were true, and if even that other agencies mentioned were also a part of it, and maybe they or in a competing one, or that they just had a falling out and they're at each other's throats. The idea of this being simply political, that's also possible, that there is somebody else in this network that they would like to be in Levett's position now. And so Levett's on his way out. He's used his influence to get rid of the scriptural teaching of capital punishment and gotten the the county government to go along with that position as well. And now they're ready to move on. That's also a possibility. But the idea that that is out there, that this is debunked, that's not true. It's not been debunked. That there is solid evidence for this behavior happening and being widespread. In the report, it talked about people of all positions, people in the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, people of high religious standing in the communities, and that's how they operate. And so the idea of him being above reproach, according to the Glenn Pace memo, though that was the level of individuals that would have been involved in these ritual abuse cases. And so we wanted to give some more background because, of course, KUTV, all of the major news networks in the state or around the country are not going to cover that. So to think that it's limited to Utah County, if it's happening in Utah County, it's likely happening wherever you're watching this from. And it's important for us to be on the lookout and recognize. I think the key is to help us use this information to recognize the real evil of the conspiracy that we face, that this isn't simple political disagreements, that we face evil, real evil. And these really evil people, of course, concentrate to power. And it's essential that we do not continue to give these evil people in power authority by recognizing their authority. Learn the solutions to what's going on. Go to treeoflibertysociety.com. Click on the Learn tab. Go through there and learn about the conspiracy that we face, and learn about the solutions that we need to be engaged in. So that was from our report from June of 2022. There are some important updates and some interesting things that we've gotten responses to about this as well that we want to cover. So this is the Tree of Liberty Society, and if you want to make sure that you are not missing any of our reports, make sure you subscribe for our email and our phone text alert system, and please become a part of the solution. Support this channel, support the efforts that we are working on, and become a part of the solution by going to treeoflibertysociety.com and becoming a member today. We are doing so much behind the scenes. We need your help. So there's been a lot going on with the satanic ritual abuse situation here in Utah and elsewhere. But for those of you that don't know, what SRA is. It stands for Satanic Ritual Abuse, and which is ritualistic abuse starting with children, and it's used to turn the victim against Christ and to train the victim to be an abuser themselves, also to build a network of protection for their crimes through the brainwashing and the brain splitting. So there are some serious sources that are really good to be able to use to be able to better understand this issue. It's a very dark and it's a very disturbing thing, but it's something that we need to know about because it's very real. It's going on and we need to be aware of it so that we can protect ourselves, protect others, and hopefully bring a stop to it. The original is the Franklin Coverup by John W. DeCamp, wonderful book that details and documents the situation out of Nebraska, which linked to many national names that we're going to get into a little bit later, as well as a follow-up book called The Franklin Scandal by Nick Bryant, who is a investigative reporter who went deep into following up from the original book by Van de Kamp and interviewing people and getting additional information. Another one is Transformation of America. Has some serious flaws in it, but I think overall there's enough good in it to at least read it and take it with a grain of salt. And another great document to be able to learn more, not a great document, but it's an important document to be able to learn more about the situation, is what's been referred to as the Glenn Pace Memo, which was put out in 1990 and was leaked to certain media at the time. And it was released to the Strengthening the Church Members Committee. So for those of you that might not know what the Strengthening the Church Members Committee is, this is the only public information that I'm aware of. If you know of some, please leave it in the comments. But in 2012, the BBC did a documentary called The Mormon Candidate, where it's discussed, and we have a couple of different church leaders discussing that situation.
I want to find out more about the mysterious Strengthening Church Members Committee. Off to the church to meet its chief spokesman and the mastermind behind the I Am a Mormon campaign, Michael Purdy. What's the Strengthening Church Members Committee, and does it still exist?
I don't know, and I'm not. I guess that's a question not for me. I couldn't tell you that. I don't know.
You're the head of media relations for the church,
Right?
and I've spoken to people, ex-members of the church, who say the Strengthening Church Members Committee does exist. Does it still exist?
I've heard that, yeah, there is a Strengthening Church Members Committee, but I couldn't tell you the details of how that works, but we'd be happy to provide someone that can.
Sorry for my confusion. When I originally asked you, you weren't sure. Now you do know that it exists, and you will give me somebody who knows something about it.
Absolutely.
So on the Strengthening Church Members Committee, the spokesman for the Mormon Church couldn't give me a satisfactory answer. Maybe the apostle could. What is the Strengthening Church Members Committee?
The Strengthening the Church Members Committee was born some years ago to protect predatory practices of polygamists.
I asked what is it?
Oh, that's what it is. It is to protect.
So it does still exist?
It does still exist. It does still exist.
And it looks at, it's there to defend the church against polygamists?
Principally. That is still the principal task.
And what is its subsidiary task?
I suppose just to be protective generally, just to watch and care for any insidious influence. But for all intents and purposes, all that I know about it is primarily to guard against polygamy. That would be the substantial, essential part of their work. I'm not on that committee, so I can't speak.
So that's what he says is the main purpose of the committee, but it had other factors involved as well, as we see, and regarding the satanic ritual abuse. So what are some key points of the memo I wanted to point out? I also discussed some of these things in the previous video, but just in case you haven't seen that, I'm going to cover some of these key points. The Glenn Pace memo says, pursuant to the committee's request, I am writing this memorandum to pass along what I have learned about ritualistic child abuse. Hopefully, it will be of some value to you as you continue to monitor the problem. You have already received the LDS Social Services Report on Satanism dated May 24th, 1989, a report from Brent Ward, and a memorandum from myself dated October 20th, 1989 in response to Brother Ward's report. Therefore, I will limit this writing to information not contained in those papers. That's very interesting because those other ones, the report from Brent Ward and his memorandum from 1989, were never made public that I'm aware of. So again, if you're aware of either one of those, please pass those along to us. We really appreciate it. So continuing on in the memo, Bishop Pace says, I have met with 60 victims. That number could be twice or 3 times as many if I did not discipline myself to only 1 meeting per week. I have not wanted my involvement with this issue to become a handicap in fulfilling my assigned responsibilities. On the other hand, I felt someone needed to pay the price to obtain an intellectual and spiritual conviction as to the seriousness of this problem within the church. Of the 60 victims with whom I have met, 53 are female and 7 are male. 8 are children. The abuse occurred in the following places: Utah, Idaho, California, Mexico, and other places. 53 victims are currently living in the state of Utah. All 60 individuals are members of the church. 45 victims allege witnessing and are participating in human sacrifice. The majority were abused by relatives, often their parents. All have developed psychological problems, and most have been diagnosed as having multiple personality disorder or some other form of dissociative disorder. Ritualistic child abuse is the most hideous of all child abuse. The basic objective is premeditated to systematically and methodically torture and terrorize children until they are forced to disassociate. The torture is not a consequence of the loss of temper, but the execution of well-planned, well-thought-out rituals, often performed by close relatives. The only escape for the children is to disassociate. They will develop a new personality to enable them to endure various forms of abuse. The memories seem to come in layers. For example, the first memory might be of incest. Then they remember robes and candles. Next, they realize that their father or mother, or both, were present when they were being abused. Another layer will be the memory of seeing other people hurt and even killed. Then they remember having seen babies killed. Another layer is realizing that they participated in the sacrifices. One of the most painful memories may be that they even sacrificed their own baby. With each layer of memory comes another set of problems with which they must deal. Some have said that the witnesses to this type of treatment cannot be trusted because of the victim's unstable condition and because practically all of them have some kind of dissociative disorder. In fact, the stories are so bizarre as to raise serious credibility questions. The irony of this is that one of the objectives of the occult is to create multiple personalities within the children in order to keep the secrets. So he's recognizing that the victims, or the alleged victims in some cases, have unstable conditions, and that they universally have a dissociative disorder, and that their claims are extremely bizarre to the extent that they seem uncredible. But he also says that that is one of the objectives of the occult, is to create that situation, to remove their credibility so that people do not believe them. He says, however, when 60 witnesses testify to the same type of torture and murder, it becomes impossible for me personally not to believe them. The spiritual indoctrination which takes place during the physical abuse is one of the most difficult to overcome. In addition to experiencing stark terror and pain, the children are also instructed in satanic doctrine. Everything is completely reversed. White is black, black is white, good is bad, bad is good. Satan is going to rule during the millennium. Children are put in a situation where they believe they are going to die. such as being buried alive or being placed in a plastic bag and immersed in water. Prior to doing so, the abuser tells the child to pray to Jesus to see if he will save her. Imagine a 7-year-old girl having been told she is going to die, praying to Jesus to save her, and nothing happens. Then, at the last moment, she is rescued. But the person saving her is a representative of Satan. He uses this experience to convince her that the only person who really cares about her is Satan. She is Satan's child, and she might as well become loyal to him. Just before or shortly after their baptism into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in this case, children are baptized by blood into the Satanic order, which is meant to cancel out their baptism into the church. They will be asked if they understand or have ever felt the Holy Ghost. When they reply that they have, they will be reminded of the horrible things that they have participated in and will be told that they have become a son or daughter of perdition and therefore have no chance of being saved or loved by our Father in heaven or Jesus. However, they have told me the positions in the church of members who are perpetrators. Among others, there are young women leaders, young men leaders, bishops, a patriarch, a stake president, temple workers, and members of the tabernacle choir. These accusations are not coming from individuals who think they recognize someone, but from those who have been abused by people they know, in many cases, their own family members. So it wasn't like that they recognized them and said, oh yeah, it was that guy. It was people that were like their fathers or their mothers. Not only do some of the perpetrators represent a cross-section of the Mormon culture, but sometimes the abuse has taken place in our own meeting houses. I don't pretend to know how prevalent the problem is. All I know is that I have met with 60 victims. Assuming each one comes from a coven of 13, we are talking about the involvement of 800 or so right here on the Wasatch Front. Obviously, I have only seen those coming forth to get help. They are in their 20s and 30s for the most part. I can only assume that it is expanding geometrically, and I'm horrified the numbers represented by the generation who are now children and teenagers. So it's not just in Utah. Like Glenn Pace Memo says that they happen in Idaho, California, Mexico, and other places. Also, we have what's involved in the Franklin cover-up, which was out in Nebraska, which includes people all over the country, from Sacramento to California to Washington, D.C. So we also have confessions. It's not just people that have said that, oh, I had false memories implanted, but we have people confessing. Here's a report that was put out in the 1990s, which says that there's no significant overall differences between ritual and religion-related cases with respect to evidence of abuse and harm, except that religion-related cases more often involved perpetrator confessions. However, child religion-related cases were more likely to involve evidence of abuse and harm than other cases. Also, we have the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime published a report in 1992, Investigator's Guide to Allegations of Ritual Child Abuse. It says, why are victims alleging things that do not seem to be true? Some of what the victims in these cases allege is physically impossible. Victim cut up and put back together. Offender took the building apart and then rebuilt it. Some is possible, but improbable. Human sacrifice, cannibalism, vampirism. Some is possible and probable. Child pornography, clever manipulation of victims. And some is corroborated. Medical evidence of vaginal or anal trauma and offender confessions. So, but even with those confessions, we have a lot of government and media cover-up. With in Nebraska, the newspaper saying that it was a carefully crafted hoax, even though they had confessions. The Deseret News reports that report finds little proof of the abuse. Satanic abuse is all a myth. A brief history of satanic panic in the 1980s and more recent reports in 2015, trying to get the idea that Satan doesn't exist. And of course, if he does, they're just a bunch of Gothic people doing weird Gothic things, not actually hurting people, because, people that follow Satan would never actually hurt somebody. And in fact, I got an email regarding my original report the individual would probably be somebody that a lot of you know who he is, but he didn't say that I could use. I didn't ask, but he didn't say that I could use his name. So we'll just use the bulk of. This is the entirety of his email to me. It says, Ben, you should not cover this topic without ascertaining which witnesses have had psychological therapies where hypnosis was used to restore forgotten memories. Hypnosis, where a person releases his mind into the control of the hypnotist, is very liable to be controlled by Satan, which can implant false memories. This has been proven in several cases where children have undergone hypnosis and claimed that a father abused them. But the father proved that he was not, I'm guessing he meant was not, even in the state at the alleged time. I frankly discount every witness testimony on abuse that comes from hypnotic or psychological suggestion. Abuse does occur, but you can't trust unstable people that have been under psychological pressure or hypnosis to engage in false memory recovery. You mentioned how crazy some of these people are, but you don't dig further into what kind of psychological treatment they have undergone. So I did mention that, in fact, that false memories can be implanted. And so I don't know if they didn't listen or if they just missed that part, but I did cover that. And I do admit that false memories do happen. But as Glenn Pace said, and as the situation back in Nebraska elucidates, as well as those reports that were put out by the Department of Justice, there are confessions to satanic ritual abuse. There are corroborating evidence that backs up satanic ritual abuse. And it would be impossible to ascertain which of these witnesses did and did not have such psychological therapies. And so what we want to do is to say, yes, some of these people have been accused falsely. We don't want to just say that all of them, every single individual that has been accused is automatically guilty. But when, like Glenn Pace said, when you have multiple individuals that are not associated with each other, not mentioning somebody, famous maybe, but mentioning their own family members, and they're all telling the same type of story, you have to give it some credibility, as well as the fact that there is evidence that it occurs. So after my initial report, I was then contacted by Brady Zdrod. And she reached out and said, my name is Brandy Zdrod, and I'm a reporter for NBC News. So we got the corporate media reaching out. I've been reporting on a long-form project regarding ritual abuse, and I've come across your work in investigating the Pace Memo. I've heard your stories about meeting Bishop Pace, and it seems like you're the only one. You're one of the very few people to talk with him about his work documenting satanic ritual abuse. Would you have the time or inclination to talk with me about meeting him? So, yes, it is true. I'm one of the few people that have actually met with Bishop Pace and talked to him. It was 2 weeks before he died, and some people have asked the question, would he die of the jab? The answer is no. He died before all that stuff came out. So it was like 2018, 2019. I can't remember the exact year. But I did meet with him and talk to him, and he verified that the memo is accurate and that it's actually worse than what he wrote. And he seemed very upset and very concerned that I met with him, that I came to his house. And so I wanted to look into Brandy. And so I wanted to show you some of the things that she's quote unquote reporting on. So watch this report, so-called, on NBC News.
Phrase from the 1980s, satanic panic. It was sort of shorthand for a slew of false accusations that children were involved in satanic rituals.
Yeah, well, now the conspiracy is making a comeback online, and this is thanks to groups like QAnon. You know that name. NBC News senior reporter Brandy Zdrod covers extremism and the internet for us and joins us now. So, Brandy, in your story, you highlight the story of a Republican who's running for re-election in Utah. Help us understand the connection here.
Well, this Republican prosecutor was running for re-election in Utah. He was the top prosecutor. He was pretty progressive. Some people labeled him soft on crime, but he was a upstanding Mormon guy, pillar of the community. And what had happened was these old allegations made in the 90s and the early aughts were sort of brought up again by political foes, by someone who he was extraditing from another country, and weaponized against him. These allegations are wild. They are very unlikely to be true. And unfortunately, what happened was people got them in public records requests and spilled them all over the internet. He had to come forward into his real life and say, neither I nor my wife, who is a professor at BYU, are doing these things, cannibalizing children, murdering children, things too awful to even think about. And because of that, in part, he lost the election.
You and I have worked on some of these QAnon stories together. We know how these things can just go viral for no reason. I heard that you're reporting that Astroworld, the music festival last year, which is where 10 people were killed, is also involved in some of this conspiracy theory?
Yeah, well, Kate, the thing is that now, because of the internet, ferreting out Satan is now sort of a participatory misinformation quest. And so a thing like Astroworld happens and something terrible happens. And so it's not just enough that something terrible happens. It's that Satan is somehow involved in it. And people are seeing symbols and somehow signs, piecing together parts of social media. And it's not just things like Astroworld, right? It can happen in any sort of situation. So we're seeing that sort of satanic labeling and piecing together clues happening in all sorts of situations and events. It's pretty widespread now.
Very disturbing. Brandy Zdrod, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
So it's disturbing. Not what's going on to them is not disturbing, but the fact that it's being exposed is disturbing. And so didn't mean to give them all that coverage, but I wanted to show the whole thing because it's just full of all kinds of brainwashing techniques, frankly, to get you to dismiss with all of the satanic panic, unlikely accusations, et cetera, to get people to dismiss as a whole.
Brandy Zdrod is a, quote, reporter with NBC News. What does she do exactly? Well, by her description, her job is seeking out personally identifying information about anonymous Trump supporters online, some of them, and revealing their true identities. Zdrod has acknowledged, quote, this: I use social media sleuthing to learn about a subject's real life, their family, friends, jobs, personal and political associations. So what does that mean exactly? What kind of information? Well, that information could include phone records, property records, even their Amazon wish lists.
And that's the problem. And that's really why, because I believe with the evidence of, you look at her own Twitter thread on this topic, she did not, I don't believe personally, that she had any desire to have an honest discussion, that she would basically use it as a way to be able to further poo-poo it and try to make people not believe it anymore. Because that is what she is doing, is trying to dismiss it, even though it is documented. It's documented. To dismiss it as a whole is ridiculous. So again, I want to go back and share some of the original news reports about it, and then follow up with some things that have happened more currently. So check this out.
The sheriff's office is using. That the sheriff's office is using its position for political gain.
Claims outlined in a 151-page victim statement from a 2012 case against a therapist named Utah County Attorney David Levett and several others.
Alleging that we were guilty of cannibalizing young children and murdering young children.
Well, there are a number of reasons why the Utah County Attorney's Office might have a conflict of interest. Not just because Levett named himself as a suspect earlier this year. He's also given multiple statements about his relationship with Hamblin and some of the alleged victims. As you're about to see, the nature of those statements have changed over the past 2 years.
Would you mind riding in the back of a police car?
Men and women allege David Hamblin used positions of power as a father, a therapist, a neighbor, and as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, to ritualistically abuse children. He was arrested Wednesday morning, but investigators say he probably won't be the only one.
I have nothing to hide.
Until Hamblin's arrest, Fox 13 News chose not to identify any of the subjects of the investigation, but that did not stop Utah County Attorney David Levett from outing himself as a suspect in June and describing his relationship with Hamblin.
I prosecuted the therapist in Juab County for poaching a deer. He poached a deer to use for ritualistic purposes. This therapist was my elders quorum president in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He was my neighbor. I had a family connection.
During that same press conference, Levett described his accuser as tragically mentally ill. She's one of the same women who accused Hamblin and others.
Shame on you for doing that. It's uncalled for. He said tragically mentally ill woman 5 times. To attack their mental health status as a way to discredit them, and it was clear that that's what he was doing, and that's just not okay.
There is no organized ring of abuse. It was debunked.
But watch and listen. More than 2 years before that press conference, Levett sat down for a different interview and was asked if he thought ritualistic sex abuse was real. He went on to describe Hamblin and his own accuser, calling her a victim.
Do I think that occurs? Yeah, I think it occurs. I know some victims of it. Yeah, I know some victims of it. I was not in a position to prosecute it. Who was into Native American stuff, had killed deer and get deer hearts and drink their blood and drink the deer's blood.
At the time, Levett was under investigation by Homeland Security.
How do you train a dog to roll over when it's time to roll over? You do it by giving a reward and repetition. If a man wants to program some little girl to give immoral sex anytime he wants to, you start young and give rewards. It's...
So he contradicts himself. He says that there is no ring of ritualistic, satanic ritualist abuse. And he calls her crazy. But then in another one, he says, oh, yes, it's real. Yes, it exists. And yes, she's a victim. And then, of course, in both interviews, tries to dismiss the entire connection to Hamblin of, it was just about Indian rituals. But the same lady, okay, let me go back. We'll go here. There's hundreds of victims have come forward since May of 2022. But only one person has been charged. The same individuals that accused Jacob Hamblin have accused David Levett. That is very interesting that only one of them has been charged, but just, about a week or so ago, David Levett announces on his Facebook page that he's bought a castle in Scotland. So he doesn't get charged. All of the things kind of go away, and we have a little scapegoat in Hamblin, and David Levett gets to go buy a castle in Scotland. Okay, so the bottom line is what we see here is the government and media are working together to cover up the most evil of crimes and the most evil of conspiracies. That is just an undeniable fact. Are we going to continue to give them legitimacy by voting, listening, and obeying them? That is what it comes down to. That's why it's important to understand this, because why are we giving these people legitimacy when they are a part of this horrible, horrible behavior? So I want to bring it back, right? Because this is not just in one place. Franklin Coverup shows that this is a network that goes across the entire country. There's a clip from the documentary on satanic ritual abuse called The Conspiracy of Silence.
Despite the investigation, Larry King remained free to feed his pedophilic parties with child victims. But in 1988, a routine review brought the Boys Town cases to the attention of Nebraska's State Foster Care Review Board.
And the information presented to the Foster Care Review Board, either via the telephone reports, the personal reports, or the reports we reviewed, Larry King's name was consistently present as someone that the youth were making allegations against. I mean, I turned that information over to authorities, and nothing happened. I would say we handed over at least a foot-high amount of material. Generally speaking, the allegations were ignored.
Omaha police now accept that Larry King may have been abusing children.
Good morning, Roberta.
Good morning, King.
But its most senior detective claims he never received any evidence.
It is certainly possible that Mr. King was involved in illegal acts with children. If there was sufficient evidence of those types of allegations, he would have been prosecuted by the county attorney's office.
For me, it was very clear that the case was not investigated and not pursued because of the alleged perpetrators.
Those perpetrators named by the children formed a ring of rich and powerful pedophiles in Omaha. Men from industry, politics, the media, even the police.
Working together, and this is a network. So not only was it just there in Omaha, but it was nationwide. The powerful people that were implicated were people like Warren Buffett, John Kerry, George W. Bush, and people in the Reagan-Bush cabinet. And so we see this as being, we see what's going on. We wonder, people always want to say, oh, you know, Biden is just stupid, or someone, the thing against Bush was he was just stupid. They want us to just make it as if they're stupid. They don't know what they're doing, because then we just say, okay, we can just vote harder next time and not get somebody stupid in there. No, this is a network, a bipartisan network of Satanists that are working together to destroy our liberties. And so we cannot continue to treat them legitimately, because they are not. I will not let a Satanist tell me how to raise my children, that I shouldn't put them in front of cross-dressing trannies reading story hours, that I will not force them to, I will not let them put poisons inside of me. I will not let them muzzle me. It's insanity to think that we will let these people govern over us when this is what they are engaged in. So again, make sure you do not miss another report from the Tree of Liberty Society by subscribing to our email list and our text message list, and support our efforts. Become a part of it. Join with us. Become part of the solution. Take part of the benefits of membership. We have so many of these documents as well on the membership portal as a benefit, as a thank you for supporting our efforts. So please go to treeoflibertysociety.com and become a member today. We'll see you next time.